Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to APSCA's second general meeting of members. My name is Andrea Gilders. I'm the APSCA membership manager, and I'll be starting us off on the call today. We're going to be turning off our cameras now to prioritize bandwidth so that people can see the presentation. Next slide. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items to ensure that you're actively able to join in to participate in today's event. You've probably joined the presentation using your computer speaker system. If you would prefer to join over the phone or at any time you begin to have internet issues, please select phone call in the audio pane on GoToWebinar, and then the dial-in information will be displayed. You may need to change the country to receive different phone numbers. You'll have the opportunity to submit questions to us by typing into the questions pane of the control panel at any time. You can also submit questions if you have technical difficulties and the team can assist you. If you're having difficulties with the question pane or via joining by phone, please email your questions to director@theapsca.org. Following today and tomorrow's sessions, we will summarize the Q&A, share those with participants, and post them on our website. Also, please be advised that today's webinar is being recorded. Next. If you wish to keep the conversation going, please follow us on Twitter and or LinkedIn. We continue to be active across all social media and encourage you to follow, like, share, and assist with spreading the word about APSCA's ongoing progress. We appreciate your posting and sharing using this year's AGM and stakeholder event hashtags, hashtag AGM 2021 and hashtag APSCA. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to reiterate our antitrust statement. Before each APSCA meeting, we remind our members about the need to comply with antitrust laws. The antitrust laws require that companies make their own unilateral decisions regarding the prices they charge, the services they provide, and who they do business with. Such decisions cannot be made collectively with competitors. Since this meeting is to discuss industry standards and certification program, public policy matters, and APSCA organizational and operational issues, such discussions are appropriate and not in violation of the antitrust laws. Additionally, APSCA meetings are conducted under the Chatham House rule, which means information disclosed during a meeting may be reported by those present, but the source of that information may not be explicitly or implicitly identified. We appreciate that you respect this rule. I'd like to now take the opportunity to introduce APSCA President and CEO Rana Starr. Welcome, Rana. Would you like to take us through the agenda?
Yeah, great. Thanks very much. So thanks very much to everybody for joining us today. I really appreciate it. We do have a very packed agenda. And so I want to ensure that we have ample time for Q&A. Yesterday we had so many questions. We will be summarizing all of those, but we want to make sure that we have plenty of time to get through as many questions as possible. So please submit your questions through the chat box. We'll be gathering them throughout the 3 hours that we're together. And we'll answer as many as we can, as we mentioned. So in addition to some of our standard agenda topics, we have a great panel with multiple people providing an overview and thoughts on what's happening in the industry regarding legislation and human rights due diligence, as well as the push for liability to be placed on auditors and more. We look forward to introducing you to John Drimmer, our moderator for the panel, as well as his team of presenters in about an hour's time. You're also going to hear from our ethics exam team, as well as you'll hear from Andrea again on CPD. I'm just going to take you through our team. So Andrea Gilders, our membership manager, you met her just a few minutes ago. She's based in Canada. Alex Nasser is our director of code and compliance. He's based in Hong Kong. Emma Youngman's our data and compliance coordinator. She works closely with Alex. She's based in Australia. Barbara Youngman's our exam manager, also based in Australia. Josh Morris is our data administrator based in Australia. Julie Shaw is exam support. She backs up many of the team in various activities, and you probably remember Julie. She's been with us since 2016. Vala Chester is our account manager, and Kathy Vestering, who just started with us a week ago, is our office administrator, and she's based in the US. We also have 4 consultants that support many of our activities. We have Tim Linden, who's our senior advisor of ethics. He's based here in the US. Annette Deal, our senior graphics designer, who focuses on our newsletter and annual report and many other of our documents that you see on our website. Jonathan Ivelaw Chapman is our data privacy officer based in the UK, and Simon Lennon is our membership due diligence reviewer, application reviewer, and he's based in Australia. We're going to move on to some of our more formal parts of our session, and I am now going to take the opportunity to introduce you to our Executive Board Chair, Avadis Safarian, who Avadis and I are here together today, so we're very excited about that. But I'm now going to hand over to Avadis.
Thank you, Rana, and once again, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, depending on where you are. In fact, for some of you who are joining us from the west coast of the US, I'd say it's still good night, but bless you for getting up early to be with us. As Rana said, implicitly at least, we lament the fact that this is yet again a virtual AGM. Our first few had the benefit of all being in person, and that really does add to the dynamic. Last year's, of course, could not be and had to be virtual, and this year as well, we have to be doing this through the wonderful technology that enables us to do it. But we have been able to have Rana and me at least in the same room, so that's a start. And hopefully next year we'll be able to do this in person once again. One advantage of being virtual is that we have been able to have record attendance. We had well over 200 people last night, and much more than that, over 230 this morning already. And so this easily makes this the most attended AGM in APSCA's short existence. And in fact, I'm given to understand that some of the 233 now that we have in attendance were also here last night. So we must have done something right, because these folks are back, and we certainly appreciate them, and we appreciate all of you taking the time to be with us for the next few hours as we talk about our theme of building on our success. We had Facing the Future last year, and we've had quite a year in between. And as Rana said, we're going to go through some of the formal part of the process here, and that begins with a review of the governance of APSCA. As you can imagine, this has over the years essentially meant reintroducing the governance structure of the organization, the executive board, as well as the stakeholder board. And that's all well and good, and it's important to understand sort of the structural piece. But this year, in addition to a review of structure and review of process, there is actually a governance action that we had to take recently, and that I am going to start this section with by updating all of you on this call. When you have big meetings like this, you want to have everything prepared well in advance and have nothing left for the last minute, but sometimes last minute curveballs come your way, and we had one sent our way last week when the APSCA Executive Board early last week was informed about an email making the rounds that had in it allegations making claims of impropriety concerning APSCA's financial conduct. It primarily related to the fact that based off of the public 990s, the tax filings that APSCA has submitted, the original structure of APSCA in the early years was working primarily through a management consulting organization, and so there were questions being raised about what was happening to those funds being paid to that that consulting organization, and concerns about whether there was any tax evasion, payroll tax evasion involved. We did not receive that complaint ourselves at APSCA. We were told of it by others who had received it, and nonetheless, the board felt that this was an opportunity for us to model the behavior we would expect to see among APSCA member firms in adherence to the code and standards of professional conduct. And so we decided to treat this as a whistleblower complaint, even though it was not sent to us directly. And in doing so, in keeping with that code and our belief that such complaints should always be taken seriously and should be addressed promptly and credibly, we immediately engaged outside counsel to initiate an investigation into those allegations. We knew that we had this AGM coming up fairly quickly, and so we asked for that to be expedited, to be done as promptly as possible. And of course, that meant nothing comes for free, so we had to make an investment. But again, as I said, the board felt that this was the right thing to do, because it is important to show that the code is what we strongly believe in. And no matter how confident we were in our systems, nobody is above the code, not even APSCA itself. So the independent investigation was conducted by the law firm of Webster, Chamberlain, and Bean, based in Washington, D.C. It included engaging with, in addition to APSCA staff and board members, APSCA's third-party accountant, as well as the independent financial auditor, who reviewed APSCA's financial statements for 2019 and is conducting an audit for 2020. The investigation has concluded that none of the claims have been substantiated. The executive board has had a chance to review the report, and we accept the independent conclusion. We are satisfied that there has been no impropriety, and to that end, we consider the matter closed. In fact, in a wonderful coincidence, Rana actually visited our lawyers yesterday, and she informs me that earlier this year, the IRS had randomly picked our tax returns for an audit. And not only have we had no tax evasion of any kind, we actually overpaid, and we have received a refund of a couple of $1,000s, which I understand, as I said, the lawyer handed to Rana yesterday. So a completely perfect coincidence, and as objective a piece of evidence of the fact that we have had no mispropriety at all in the way we have handled our financial reporting. Of course, we always believe in continuous improvement, and we will always continue to seek ways in which we can further improve our financial reporting, but it is very gratifying that these allegations are not substantiated, and as I said, the board considers the matter closed. We thank APSCA's members for their support of this process and for their commitment to the code and standards of professional conduct. If you have any further questions, we have time for Q&A later this morning, and you can always reach out to the executive board through me, the chair. So with that piece of governance action described, let me go back to the process and structure piece and reintroduce the executive board to you. As you know, we have A, B, and C membership, each of which is represented on the board. And our A member representatives are Rajan Kamalanathan from Bureau Veritas, Justin Betty from Intertech, and Anastasia Spathi from SGS. The B and C member representatives are Frank Dorsers from TUV Rhineland, Greg Gardner from March Advisors, and Randy Rankin from Eurofins. The board is rounded out by the stakeholder board representatives. The stakeholder board itself has 3 caucuses, a brand, a collaborative program, and an independent caucus. Laura Rubo from Disney represents the brand caucus. Mark Spears is the independent representative on the board, and I am the chair and from RAP, a collaborative program, representing that caucus on the board. As with any board, we have our officers, of course, and as you know, I am the chair. Justin Betty is our secretary. Greg Gardner is our treasurer, and Rana Starr, of course, is our president and CEO. In addition to this executive board, which is really a very hardworking and wonderfully dedicated group, and I really want to thank them for the time and energy they've given to APSCA throughout their tenure, but especially, of course, this past week leading up to this AGM. In addition to those wonderful people, we also have a wonderful group of members of our stakeholder board, which, as I said, is made up of those 3 caucuses, the brand and retailer caucus, the collaborative program caucus, and the independent caucus. And you can see here which organizations and individuals are in each of those 3 buckets. Home Depot, Walt Disney, Walmart, Coca-Cola, Lidl, and Samsung make up our brand and retailer caucus. Amfori, SAI, SEDEX, and RAP have representatives in the collaborative programs caucus, and Mark Spears, Doug Kahn, and Elizabeth Bistrom are our independents on the stakeholder board. So once again, my deep gratitude to all of these folks who have shown to me and to all of us really how much they care about the mission and the organization, and have given so much of their time and energy to advancing the cause that is APSCA, and a very worthy and important cause at that. Turning to this AGM then, and the theme of building on success, I'm going to hand over to Rana in a second to walk us through the journey of our organization and what we've gone through and what we've achieved and what we have in mind ahead of us. But just to remind the audience as we go into that of the vision of this organization, to have our members be the trusted professionals in social compliance auditing. It is a profession. It is an engagement that is really fundamentally built on trust, built on professionalism, and to have our members as the trusted professionals in social compliance auditing is the North Star of APSCA. From that flows our mission to increase the value and effectiveness of independent social compliance audits, and we do this by enhancing the professionalism, consistency, and credibility of the individuals and organizations that perform them. So with that vision and mission, it's a little early in the morning here, clearly in our minds, I turn things over now to Rana to walk us through the APSCA journey and tell us about the successes on which we'll be building going forward.
Great.
Rana.
Thanks very much, Avadis. We're going to turn our camera back off now as we sort of get through the slides. We want to make sure some of the slides are a little small, so we want to make sure that you can see them adequately. So as we look at our journey, as Avadis mentioned, APSCA is the 6th attempt by the industry to professionalize. And whilst the other 5 attempts did not move forward to completion, they have played and continue to play a crucial role in laying the foundation by which APSCA has taken our learnings and progressed through to the establishment of a collaborative organization, which includes our stakeholder board that Avadis just introduced, of our brands, retailers, collaborative programs, and independents. And with those organizations and more going on to make up the various working groups, as well as our consultation groups, which develop the code of professional conduct, as well as the competency framework, which have both been the foundation to our examination, as well as our ethics and integrity process. Many from those working and consultation groups went on to support the development of the examination process and also participated in a number of our pilot exams that took place in 2017 and 2018. APSCA also launched our disciplinary process, which reviews the allegations in consolidation with feedback from our firms and auditors that were involved prior to moving to the disciplinary and/or appeals boards as applicable. And Alex is going to talk us through that process a little bit more later in our AGM presentations. So being a young organization, APSCA continues to improve and to refine our policies and processes and continue to strive towards the mission of enhancing the professionalism and credibility of the social compliance audit industry. Our members are located in over 100 countries, and we have 55 member firms. We have more than 4,500 auditors who have set over 11,000 exams. And we've certified more than 1,200 auditors, with that number continuing to grow every day. We execute on average 500 exams per month, and we're going to hear from Barbara, our exam manager, in a few minutes. So 40%, these are just some fun facts of APSCA, 40% of our auditors are female, and just over 45% of those are certified. So I find that a really interesting statistic that our auditors are based up of, basically 40–60% male female, and that number hasn't really changed, or that percentage hasn't really changed since we started enrolling auditors in 2017. As I mentioned earlier, we have over 1,200 certified auditors, and this represents between 25 and 26% of our total auditor base. Over 70% of our enrolled auditors are noted as employed with a member firm, and 89% of our certified auditors are employed by at least one of our member firms. So during 2021, it was filled with a lot of ongoing trials and tribulations, which COVID continues to escalate. And in spite of this, we have had a year of quite a lot of successes. And we're just going to take you through a few of those achievements. So our team during the year was focused on how we can improve the execution of APSCA and the requirements of members, and how can we continue to support our members in a better way. This included enhancements to our data system, to the tracking and the ability of our member firms to be able to monitor their associated auditors, and how they're progressing through the requirements, submitting audit logs, sitting exams, making sure they're sitting on time, as well as we really focused on ways that we could get those results out to you quicker. As we know, that's what most people are looking for, is how fast can they get their results turned around. We've continued to enhance The Part 2 feedback. About a month ago, we have started providing additional information on those Part 2 exams when they have not resulted in a pass mark, of additional areas for the auditors to improve on. We're in the final stage of testing additional feedback for all Part 3 exams, and we're anticipating having that launched any day now. Since APSCA commenced the exam process in 2018, we've executed more than 11,000 exams across all 3 parts. Earlier this year, APSCA launched both Part 1 and 2 in additional 6 languages, bringing the total offering to 2 languages in both of those exams. We've also set up a method with ProctorU where auditors who wish to sit Part 1 and 2 in any language beyond the existing 10, they'll be able to book that shortly, and the exam team are making a few refinements to the process with regards to submission of the exam request sheets, and will be communicating that process to our member firms in the coming weeks. We continue closer towards achieving our mission and the implementation of numerous improvements, which include the strict management of exam deadlines and the integration of the exam booking system for Part 3, which is the exam site which is linking the interviewer, the auditor, and ProctorU. We've also shortened the amount of time that auditors sitting Part 1 and Part 2 need to book in advance, and you can now book that in 21 days instead of the original 30 days. And we've also worked on speeding up the issuing of exam results. We've also and continue to look at ways in which we can expand and provide that feedback for Part 2 and Part 3, as I mentioned a few moments ago, and we'll continue to focus on continuous improvement in those areas. So under governance, we've finalized through our third-party financial auditors, as Avadis mentioned a moment ago, a successful review of our 2019 accounts, and we're progressing with an audit of our 2020 accounts. You'll hear from our ethics and integrity team a bit later. However, one of their achievements was to conduct a gap analysis of our ethics and integrity program and have implemented enhancements to our complaint handling procedures. We continue to work with our IT team to enhance the security on our data system, and we've embedded this into our APSCA website, which has also enhanced the user experience for our member auditors in particular, with regards to the implementation of CPD, both on our website and open to auditors to add on their APSCA profile, which recently was launched. And Andrea will talk about that a bit later. Under communications, the team have developed a language report to support our member firms when identifying which auditors are required to sit exams and understand which languages their auditors have identified as being advanced in. There are many more successes that have been achieved, and 2022 is already being set up to be an exciting year, and we look forward to seeing that ongoing progress. One of the other implementations has been the development of a digital membership card, and this went live earlier this week. A special thanks to Josh and Emma for driving this forward. So what is this digital card replacing? Previously, we issued physical cards, which were only given to auditors upon achieving certification status. These cards were created manually and posted via the good old mail system, and it could take months before they were actually received. Now, every auditor, regardless of their level, will have an APSCA member card. These cards are updated daily and making it easier for you to check your status and your level. These changes eliminate the manual labor that's been involved in the production of the physical cards, as well as the cost with regards to postage and delay in receiving. Auditors will receive their digital membership cards as soon as their APSCA membership number is issued, and they are updated daily, as mentioned, if there are any changes in the status or level. There are security systems that are in place to prevent fraudulent production of the cards, and the cards will offer as a clear visual indicator of an auditor's level and include a QR code that will direct anybody who scans it to our portal from our website for additional clarification or verification as needed. The digital membership card is in the beta or phase 1 stage, and we'd welcome feedback from member auditors. If you have any issues at all in seeing your digital membership card and are an APSCA member auditor, please email Josh on the data administrator email address, and he will be able to assist you. If you go into your My Auditors or the NAC system to your profile, where if you're a member auditor, you are providing your consent, or you can see your exam results, you can actually get that membership card from that profile. Whoops, hang on, I've lost my mouse, so I can't move forward. There we go. Okay. Communications is an area where we continue to improve and have areas of opportunities. As we work with our communication specialist, we've developed a calendar of events and topics to cover each month. And earlier this year, we completed a member survey to gain further information regarding the outcome that's been uploaded to our website. We continue to leverage this feedback as we develop our practices. Our member happenings, which is a newsletter that goes out just to our member firms throughout the year, have been well received. And with the Andrea coming on board in the last couple of months, we're going to continue to identify further enhancements on how we can improve our communications. Some opportunities that are underway is the enhancing of our resource library, and with the structure of that page to make it easier to find what you're looking for. And we just saw some drafts coming from our IT folks on that, so we look forward to releasing that in the coming weeks. We do always welcome your feedback and ways that we continue to improve in our communications. So since we rolled out our exams in 2018, and with the launch of Part 3 in 2020, we've seen a number of certified auditors continuing to grow. We hit 1,000 certified auditors at the end of August, and we've now achieved over 1,200. We took the opportunity in September to interview many of those auditors who achieved the certification status, and we've shared some of their feedback in our annual report. And some of that feedback ranges from words of advice to other auditors going through the process, as well as thoughts and the value on obtaining certification status. It's a great chance to show professionalism to factories that our auditors are conducting those audits, as well as companies that our auditors are working for. We applaud these auditors on their achievements and work hard and look forward to continuing to welcome more and more certified auditors to this level. So one of the questions that we hear is, what happens after an auditor receives their certification status? How do we ensure that they stay up to date? Well, once an auditor achieves that certification, we require 48 hours per year of continuous professional development. And Andrea is going to talk more about this a bit later. But with any continuous professional development, the intent is that it has multiple ways in which our auditors can continue to learn, stay informed regarding emerging issues, and APSCA will continue to add to the offerings as well as guidance in the future. So some of our goals that are coming soon. During 2022, we have a number of goals that we're focused on. And one of those is phasing out of the interim level status of registered level auditor. We're also expanding the exams to cater for all languages, and some of this is going to be using technology. As we're looking at our membership, beyond member firms and associated auditors, we're going to be looking at organizations that also have internal auditors. We've also got further enhancements to our ethics and integrity program, as well as the expansion of continuous professional development. Underpinning all of this is communications, data systems, and the processes required to support that growth. So as we start to look at the questions that have been coming in, and again, remind you to submit those via the chat feature, and we are working, I know Avadis has been looking at all the questions that have been coming in, and we will start to answer some of those. There are some questions that also came in from yesterday's webinar that we'll also make sure that we answer those during the time, as many as we can. And we'll be consolidating those questions as well and posting those on his website as mentioned earlier. So Avadis, do we have a first question?
Yes, I think there's an easy one right here that says, now that we're moving to digital ID cards, are we no longer going to issue physical cards?
That's right. We're not going to issue physical cards. We are all going to be using those digital cards. Besides the fact that it is quite a substantial cost savings to us to not issue physical cards and post physical cards, It also ensures that each auditor has a card with them at all times that is up to date. So they do update and refresh daily.
Excellent. We also do have a couple of questions about the RA status, and folks are generally asking, why is it being phased out?
Great. So the reason it's being phased out is the interim registered level auditor was never intended to be a long-term category. It was a category that we brought in when we started to recognize auditors that had been in the system for quite a long time and were going to be making their way. They were therefore eligible to make their way through the examination process. And now that the examination process is a fair way down the track, and we've got those 1,200 certified auditors, we've done over 11,000 exams, it's now time to start that phase out period. Barbara in her exam presentation will talk a little bit more about the timing of the phase out, but it's not happening overnight. So there won't be any new RAs from next year, but certainly the existing RAs will be eligible to remain until 2023. And at that time, if they haven't become certified by that time, then they will be associates until they complete all 3 parts.
Great. A reminder for you to keep sending those questions in. There are a few here that relate to specific topics that we have yet to get to. The exam, I'm seeing one. There was, I think, an earlier one about CPD. So those will be addressed a little further in the presentation. We'll get to those, so please keep sending your questions in. On that same one we just answered, Rana, now that there is no new RAs, what will be the path to become a CSCA for new auditors?
Okay, so the pathway 4, which has been in existence for the last just over a year, pathway 4 is the main pathway, will be the only pathway from the 1st of January for auditors to get through the process. Now, pathway 4 is a pathway that enables auditors with, say, 20 days of experience, social compliance audit experience, to start going through that exam process. One of the questions we had yesterday was, how quickly can you get an auditor certified? Now, if the auditor's got the skills and competencies that are required to get certification, they could actually gain certification in less than 6 months. By the time they enroll with APSCA, get their audit log approved, sign up for the first exam, they can book that exam 21 days in advance. Then they pass that, they can then move on to part 2. So in the original pathway 1 and pathway 2 required 1 to 2 years of experience prior to be getting that RA status, as well as 100 minimum of 100 audit days of experience. But now with pathway 4, it is really being focused on the competencies that are demonstrated through the examination process. And so that's why we're moving to that pathway 4 only. This should actually be seen as a positive to people. It actually can enable auditors to get through quicker if they've got the skills and competencies.
That seems like a perfect segue for a question that we got yesterday as well, which focuses on how can member firms get more social compliance auditors certified quicker?
Right. So I think in addition to pathway 4, that and the description that I just gave about how quickly you can go through. But what I'd like to do is maybe toss this question over to one of our member firms, Greg Gardner, who's also a certified auditor, and you heard Avadi's mentioned him earlier as being on our executive board as well as our treasurer. And I think Greg can sort of talk you through some of the steps that they've used within Arch Advisors to really work with their auditors and speed up this certification process. Greg, you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can.
Well, thanks for the question. I'm not sure that we speed people through. I think we try to get people through. We got our first group through in 2019 with that first batch, and then we did some more in 2020 and this year 2021. But last year we started to have people failing the test, and at first it's like, okay, so you take it again, and some of them would pass on their second or third attempt, but then we had people that were failing after 5 and 6 and even 8 attempts, and it's like, I don't understand. You've done this for 10 years. pick a country in Italy or Brazil or someplace. And so we had to invest in the training. We what do you think you're missing? And then we'd pair them up with an experienced auditor, even though they're an experienced auditor, and try to see, and now we get more feedback from APSCA. But the idea is, don't look for the first violation, because you're trying to take an 8-hour audit and look for skills in a 2-hour test. And in the test, there's going to be findings, because we're trying to test for findings. You're not going to take a test and have no findings. And so, if somebody was basically lazy and saying, oh, I found the child labor right away. Yeah, but peel the onion, slow down like it's an audit, like you have an 8-hour day, and look for the more subtle violations, the harassment, abuse, discrimination. And so, pairing those auditors up with the, basically investing in the auditor training, flying them out, putting them in hotels, paying auditor wages that I can't charge the client, spending money that I prefer not to spend, but that's what we had to do to get that first group through the test, the more experienced auditors that were having trouble with test 2 and 3. Test 1 is strictly academic, and so that one isn't the point. It's the auditor skills that, if you're auditing produce in Mexico and you don't ever come across a double set of books like you do at a large facility in China, then we have to help them understand that and train them to look for that. But I guess the other thing that we did is, if somebody was having trouble 5, 6, 7 times on a test, and they're not able to change their mindset that this is an investigation, not just a checklist audit, if they're not able to, we're testing for a global floor for an APSCA auditor. You have at least this level of skill. And if somebody hasn't developed that level of skill, even after several years of auditing, because now there's a test that tests it, we started hiring freshers. We started hiring people right out of college that didn't have some of those bad habits, and have been able to move them through the test quicker, which I think leads to this pathway forward that, anybody that comes in now, whether they've had another job or whether this is their first time doing this, they're just going to get through taking the tests as quickly as possible, and we'll, pair them up with experienced auditors to give them the extra training. But I think pathway 4 is just the way we'll be going forward now.
Great. Thank you very much, Greg. Really appreciate that. And to reiterate a point that Rana made, as many of you know, Greg himself is a CSCA, and so does speak with, experience of the exam process and enhanced authority as a result of that. Rana, sticking with this whole general theme of getting auditors certified, here's a question about getting certified auditors. One of our members is asking, is there any way as firm representatives that they can get a list of certified auditors to recruit them?
So no, we don't publish our list. We don't publish our list of certified auditors, but we also don't publish our list of just auditors in general. I know that that's obviously a concern that many firms have, is that they're going to, spend the money to get their auditors certified, and then somebody's going to poach them. You often see posts up on LinkedIn, sort of asking for APSCA RAs or CSCA auditors, but we don't publish a list of our auditors to anybody.
And that makes sense. So talking about auditors and all sort of the value of the process of certification, one of the ones from yesterday that I was particularly interested on, I'll ask again, is could you provide practical examples of what specific aspects of the auditing process are improved or enhanced by being performed by certified auditors?
Yeah, great. No, and this kind of builds on what Greg just said as well, is, it's ensuring that the examination process ensures that auditors that, maybe they haven't been exposed to, a double set of books, or maybe they feel like they haven't been exposed to forced labor, warning signs of forced labor, etc. It is really pushing them to ensure that they learn it, because, I do believe that if you don't think, or you believe you've never seen an issue, warning signs of forced labor, harassment and abuse, discrimination, then you have blinders on to it. And so ensuring that all of the auditors are exposed to this type of issues, which are very fundamental to social compliance audit, is very important for them to be able to keep their eyes out. And so certainly we're seeing through particularly our Part 2 and Part 3 examination process, is that we are requiring that they understand what those warning signs are. One of the other elements that we do see for auditors to be able to get through the process, and Greg sort of talked about, peeling back the onion somewhat, is if they walk in and they find an element of call it discrimination, they have to still keep looking. Just because you find one, it doesn't mean that you're done with your looking. It is worthwhile having a look throughout the whole facility and just being aware that if you found one issue, there could be 2 or 3. And certainly within our examination process, we're testing to that. We're making sure that they, if they the questions, we don't put all the answers within one paragraph within the case study or the scenarios that are presented to them in part 2 and 3. There is a need for them to look beyond the one paragraph or beyond the one issue of forced labor. Most of all of those questions have got 3, 4, or even 5 issues within the scenario, and we're asking them to identify a minimum of 3 or 5. So within, as I think about an audit report, and I sort of put my old brand hat back on, if we received an audit report and there was only one issue of, maybe discrimination, we may treat that more as an isolated incident as opposed to a systemic. And so I think it's really important that the auditors, and this is what we're seeing through our auditors gaining certification, is that they are, continuing to look, even though they find one element, they continue to look. And I think that's the value that we're seeing in auditors that are becoming certified is, as Greg said, they're peeling back that onion a bit more and continuing to dive into it.
Indeed. It's not the easiest thing in the world to be a social compliance auditor, and not everyone can do it. That's the point of APSCA, of professionalizing it and of validating the skills set of those that are able to meet those requirements. Keep those questions coming. I appreciate everyone's interests, and a reminder that some of those questions, I'm seeing a few more about exam deadlines and what happens when we have technical difficulties with exams. All of those will be answered a little later in our program when we have a presentation specifically about exams. For the moment, here's an interesting one, Rana. What are brands audit requirements regarding APSCA levels as RA, CSCA, ASCA? What can you tell us about that?
So I'm going to expand that question just a tiny bit to be brands as well as collaborative programs. And so if you are an APSCA member firm, the brand or collaborative requirements of using an RA or CSCA are somewhat redundant, right? Because the Code and Standards of Professional Conduct says if you're an APSCA member firm or an APSCA member auditor, you must be at the RA or CSCA level in order to audit on your own or be taking overall responsibility for that audit. An ASCA must be with an RA or CSCA in order to conduct that audit. So if your brand or collaborative program says, we don't care about the level, APSCA still does care about the level. The client or customer cannot override the Code and Standards of Professional Conduct, which each member firm and each member auditor have signed up to. On the other side of that, if you're doing something like a remote assessment or virtual assessment, whatever terminology you want to use for that, APSCA aren't saying that they're wrong. We're not saying that they're bad. We're just saying that within APSCA's definition, it is not considered a full social compliance audit. Therefore, the requirements of your brand or collaborative program will stand. If they require a CSCA or an RA to conduct that remote or virtual assessment, then that's okay. But APSCA member numbers cannot be put on that audit report. And if an auditor uses their number incorrectly, they either add their number onto remote or virtual assessment, or if they indicate that the audit was completed in person, or if an ASCA went out and conducted that audit on their own, those allegations, when we receive them, do go to our disciplinary board, to our ethics and integrity team, and they process those in accordance with the Code and Standard of Professional Conduct.
Okay. Well, speaking of all those references to collaborative programs, we have one that is asking how APSCA works with collaborative programs and what synergies APSCA expects of those relationships. So I asked the question, but maybe I should take a stab
I think you should.
at answering it, representing, as I do, a collaborative program. RAP has long been an advocate for the existence of an organization like APSCA because we recognize the need very early on. Any compliance program, any attempts to validate systems and practices at a facility really is only as good as the quality of the auditor conducting that particular audit on that particular day at a particular site. So prior to the existence of APSCA, RAP had to take on all the quality control and training to make sure that the auditors that are going out there to do RAP audits are indeed at the level we need them to be and are maintaining the standards we want them to. So we had developed over the years a wonderful and robust training program that involved a 5-day training course with examination and all of the concomitant administration. And one big advantage of the coming to fruition of APSCA and the great strides it has made, leading up to over 1,200 CSCAs, is that we no longer need to worry about training an auditor to be an auditor, as long as they are indeed CSCAs. We can only focus on making them be RAP auditors. So instead of a 5-day training course, we're able to now reduce that to just 2 days, a bridge course. If they're CSCAs, we know that they have already validated and shown that they are meeting those requirements. So that's a big advantage, I believe, for us from an administration point of view, and also because those trainings are obviously a cost to the member firms that we engage with, and so we're able to reduce that because we don't need those 5 days. We can just do the bridge, the rapification, if such as it were, over the course of a couple of days. So that's a big advantage for us. The other piece and the other sort of reason that an organization like APSCA has always been something that the space needed is that prior to the existence or prior to some kind of professional body, there was always that risk that if you did indeed identify an auditor who was not a professional, wasn't competent, was perhaps questionably acting, and you dismissed them from your program or from your firm, there really was no mechanism to ensure that that person didn't end up working still in some other capacity in another firm or another program. And the benefit of having this sort of body that licenses and certifies auditors is that we are able to weed out permanently the few bad apples that exist in any human endeavor, but that taint the whole activity. So that's been wonderful, and RAP's been able to ensure that all auditors that we engage with that's our requirement, right? That every one of our member firms, our accredited firms, have to be APSCA member firms, and all the auditors we use have to be APSCA auditors. And so we can check that. We can go to the website, we can check their numbers. We're looking forward to the digital ID cards that'll make that even easier. And if there is concern, then we have a channel by which we can raise it, and we can make sure that we are contributing to keeping this profession healthy and keep raising that bar, and in the end really recognize it for what it is, a profession that is deserving of the plaudits and gratitude of folks that utilize its services. So very much a wonderful thing, and as you know, RAP's been a strong supporter from the very beginning, and I have been privileged to be the chair of the board since the forming of this executive board, and will continue to support this cause because it is such a worthy one. All right.
And just to add on to what Abdi said, what he describes as how we're working with RAP is also how we work with a number of other collaborative programs, as well as brands and retailers. And you'll hear a little bit more about that in Barbara's exam presentation.
Indeed. The questions keep coming, and as I said, I'll repeat, the questions about exams and the like will be handled a little bit later in the program on that specific topic. There are some questions about why certain programs have certain requirements, and I'll preempt all those by saying that really isn't APSCA's call. How other programs handle their internal processes is best asked of them. But what is APSCA's call is this discontinuation of the RA, and we keep coming back to that. Rana, can you advise on the time frame selected for the discontinuation of the RA level?
So the time frame selected.
I think they want to know what the steps are, because you identified that as of the first of the year, there'll be no new RAs,
Right.
but there will be continued to be RAs until a certain point in 2023.
Right.
So maybe
Yeah.
talk about those timeframes.
Yeah, so Barbara in the exam presentation is going to show a slide on that, but I believe that the final date for no more RAs will be the end of May 2023. So there is that 18-month, basically an 18-month rollover period where those that were already RA will have, those are already RA as they're going through the exam process. If they're passing, then they will remain the RA until they sit part 3. Obviously, if the RAs do not pass an exam, they do move down to ASCA. But when they pass the next exam, they will be eligible to move back to that RA status. But the rest of the new auditors coming in the 1st of January on, or enrolling from the 1st of January on, will be ASCAs until they pass all 3 parts of the exam.
Very good, thank you. I know our panelists are joining on the background, and I'm really looking forward to that. It was so educational yesterday, and in fact, it is so educational that we're going to be giving CPD credits for folks who are in attendance. One of the more interesting questions yesterday was the confusion over why there's only 1 hour of CPD, whereas this seminar overall is 3 hours, and the answer simply is that the CPD credits are not for attending the AGM, they are for listening to that panel, and the panel itself is only 1 hour, and we'll be getting to them in a minute. As I said, it was the highlight to me yesterday, and I'm looking forward to getting there. I don't know if this is an exam question that we save for later or we ask you now. It's about languages. Would APSCA develop exams in, African languages like Shona or other languages that are not so popularly spoken?
Yeah, so we are going to be using technology to support the languages. We have about 95 different languages that our auditors are advanced in. And so there's, I think there's 25 off the top of my head that languages, there's only 1 auditor. So we will be using technology to expand into those various different languages. And Barbara will mention that a bit in her exam presentation a bit later.
Okay. We have another couple of questions, Rana, about the availability of auditors. Not enough CSCAs sometimes to execute, or member firms needing to increase the number of, given the general labor shortage in the industry. What advice do you have for how firms can plan for this?
So I'm going to answer this question briefly, and if Greg wants to, maybe jump back in on this question as well to talk about what he's doing as a firm, just to kind of put Greg on the spot a few times. But I think APSCA has been described to me, or the industry at the moment between COVID and APSCA has kind of been described as the perfect storm. Historically it was, whilst it costs money, we could still fly people around. If you had a shortage in a country, you could, move auditors from one country to another. And with COVID, that's obviously limiting travel at times. And then also, some of the challenges have been with the auditors moving down when they failed exams. So Greg, I don't know if you're still there, if you want to maybe answer what some of the things are that you guys have been doing to kind of address this quote perfect storm.
Yeah, we've been failing at addressing the perfect storm. I started doing this in '95, and it's great to see the market grow every year. And so great for us, right? Job security in our industry. But it's been challenging because of COVID, and I will blame it mostly on COVID instead of APSCA, that there's a more demand than supply in the auditor industry right now. Because as you mentioned, we could fly people, we could travel an auditor to another place if we didn't have capacity locally. And the inability to do that because borders closed has been the biggest challenge for us to get the audits done that the clients have. But I think, using the COVID example, looking for auditors, right, on LinkedIn, trying to find auditors recently, I reached out to a woman in Germany that, social compliance auditor was in her profile, and, her response was, last year I changed careers. I got out of the industry during COVID. So again, I think it is COVID. I think that things will be easier to get the work done as, I mean, the first flight this week from the UK to the US happened after 20 months. Japan has opened back up. And so I think that Australia, right, your country, Rana, has opened back up for flights. And so I think that some of it can be fixed just by, investing, again, flying the auditors where they need to be. But to get them through the process, to get more auditors, that's just like, your earlier question to me is hiring and training them and getting them through the test. And so, if there's challenges, there's been concessions made. The clients have accepted for years now that, oh, we've created APSCA and we're creating a test and we're taking the test. And I think our clients have been very patient in us going through this process. And we're just continued to push auditors through the test, and the test is going faster and it's easier to take and it's in more languages. So I think with COVID wrapping up and borders opening up and the test being easier, I think next year is the last worst year of this process. And then after that, we'll be on a more of a maintenance mode where maybe 10% of the auditors are getting tested every year as they come in new. So if we're putting 4,500 auditors through the test in 3 years, we'll end up putting 400 or 500 through the test every year that are new, that are replacing the attrition in the industry.
Thank you again, Greg. Always appreciate your candor and certainly appreciate your engagement on these important questions. They keep coming. And again, a reminder, some of these are exam questions. They'll be addressed a little bit later, some CPD likewise. And again, a reminder that questions that are asking APSCA why a program or a scheme does things a certain way are best addressed to those schemes. I know our panelists are ready, and we want to make sure that absolutely not a second of their time is left unutilized. So I will ask just one final question, and then we'll go to the panel. Rana, we have a couple of questions I'm going to combine that ask, is APSCA going to test for specific knowledge, like South African legal knowledge, or a suite of exams for agricultural auditors? What are your thoughts on that?
So whilst I never like to say never, certainly testing for individual country laws is not something that we have ever discussed, and quite frankly, I don't think will ever be within the bandwidth of what APSCA is going to do. So the answer to that, testing for specific laws, is no. With regards to developing an exam for agricultural or something else, it is not something that we have discussed at this stage. I mean, certainly we see, and whilst we do recognize that agriculture is somewhat different to factories, the overall skills of identifying forced labor or harassment and abuse or working hour violations, health and safety, they're basically the same in an agriculture. We do understand there are other differences, so I'm not discounting that, but at this stage, we are getting through the foundational elements of social compliance audits in general, and there's not discussion about expanding it to a specific sector right now.
Understood. Wonderful. Thank you for all those great questions, and thank you, Rana, for all those answers. I know I said that was the last question I would ask before the panel. So at the risk of being deemed a liar, let me set up the panel with a question.